In September of 1940, as German planes began their relentless assault on Europe, British scientist Edward Bowen set sail for the United States. With him, he carried the cavity magnetron, a revolutionary new device representing one of the Allied powers' last hopes for a functional radar system. Though aware of the mission's urgency, Bowen could not possibly have imagined the technological explosion his trip would spark. Over the next 5 years, radar would be at the forefront of the battle against the Axis powers, leading the Allies to victories in both the Atlantic and Pacific. Perhaps more importantly, the organizational reforms that emerged out of the radar development program transforms the role of civilian scientists from outsiders to equals, setting a precedent for half a century of civilian-military collaboration. On September 1st, 1939, the SS Athenia was attacked and sunk by German submarine U-30, killing 117 civilians. The Athenia would be the first of many British ships to fall victim to German U-boats. In a period from June 1940 to February 1941, known as Die glückliche Zeit, or the Happy Time by Germans, over 270 British ships were sunk. On land, Britain faced a similar attack by Germany's Luftwaffe, whose relentless bombings depleted both Allied resources and morale. Although Britain possessed radar in the form of its chain-home system, its long-wave technology lacked the precision to effectively counter German assaults. The solution to this issue came in the form of the cavity magnetron, a resonator developed in 1940 whose capability to emit 10-centimeter radio waves made it 50 times more powerful than the 5-meter-long waves of the chain-home system. Though the cavity magnetron eliminated the issue of power, Britain, lacking the industrial capacity to transform the magnetron into a fully functional radar system, turned to America for help. In September of 1940, a British delegation known as the Tizard Mission set sail for the United States, bringing with them the cavity magnetron. The delegation displayed the device to Vannevar Bush, chairman of the newly created National Defense Research Committee, or NDRC, Dr. Alfred Loomis, chairman of the Microwave Committee in the NDRC, and Carl Compton, president of MIT. Excited by the potential of the magnetron, Loomis, Bush, and Compton unanimously agreed to build a specialized laboratory aimed at harnessing the magnetron's power to develop radar systems. Loomis and Bush decided that this laboratory, later coined Radiation Lab, or RadLab, would operate outside the confines of the military's hierarchy.
They, made a decision to kind of, quote, keep it out of uniform. This is going to be a project, at MIT, and it was going to be run by MIT, and it was going to have a much flatter, non-hierarchical kind of setup.
The first few months after RadLab opened were filled with a whirlwind of research and discovery. By March, scientists had successfully outfitted a B-18 bomber with a radar system capable of detecting submarines as far as 9 miles away. Despite RadLab's rapid progress, limited cooperation from the government hindered research. Under the NDRC, RadLab faced depleting funds and lacked the freedom to influence prototype development. Even after radar's efficacy was demonstrated through a series of successful trials, factions of the military remained doubtful of RadLab's ability to deliver in time for the war effort, and high-ranking officers held on to their beliefs that conventional strategies and systems were superior. RadLab's game-changing breakthroughs went largely ignored by the military.
When World War II started, the top brass had all been World War I veterans, and they were schooled in how you win a war like World War I. But science had taken such leaps and bounds that many weren't prepared for that.
They really thought they had to focus on the kind of radar they'd already developed and perfect that and use it more. And of course, if you're the Navy, you're on ship, you're really concerned about what can you use now? What can I use 2 months from now?
Frustrated with the military's antiquated mindset, Bush proposed a new organization, the Office of Scientific Research and Development, or OSRD, which would extend the charter of the NDRC, allowing RadLab members to investigate beyond the limited scope of weapons and devices requested by the military. Finally, on June 28, 1941, FDR formally passed the OSRD through Executive Order 8807, allowing civilian scientists free rein over their projects.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special news bulletin. The Japanese have attacked Pearl Harbor, Hawaii by air.
Following the bombing of Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, RadLab kicked their operations into high gear. Recruits were pulled from all different disciplines, and the number of workers swelled, eventually peaking at nearly 4,000 people. The newly established OSRD gave civilian scientists a greater presence within the war effort, and the resulting direct line of communication between researchers and the military meant that crews could benefit from new technology the moment it left the lab, boosting the efficiency of America's war machine.
Back in the lab, we had something called the Beacon Group. They developed systems whereby you could use beacons which could be interrogated by a radar. General says, "That's a great idea. But it's not for this war. There's no way I can get requisitions and requirements and have it in anything short of a year." I said, "Give me 24 power supplies, sergeants who know something about the aircraft and installation. I'll supply the rest of it, and we'll have it installed in 30 days. Done."
Along with greater civilian scientist involvement came the rise of operations research, or OR, a field that used aspects of the scientific method to develop optimal war strategies. One particular team based in RadLab, the Anti-Submarine Warfare Operations Research Group, helped analyze the optimal formation for convoys, revolutionizing submarine warfare tactics. As World War II raged on, America's research flourished, yielding the H-2X or Mickey radar-fitted B-24s, whose bad weather visibility gave rise to the around-the-clock bombing strategy, the SCR-517 microwave radar, which increased the ratio of sunk-to-spotted U-boats by tenfold, and most famously, the atomic bomb, whose development under the Manhattan Project was supervised by none other than the OSRD. In August of 1945, World War II drew to a close with the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Though there was no longer a combat need for radar, RadLab's crucial World War II research had set the groundwork for breakthroughs in electronics, meteorology, and atomic physics. The decades following World War II saw the rise of government labs, including Los Alamos, whose operations were inspired by the Manhattan Project, a branch of the OSRD, organizations dedicated to supporting research like the NSF and DARPA, and the increased funding of university labs across America. Post-war America also saw the proliferation of methods employed at RadLab. Large industries adopted the principles of operations research into their work, while university labs and government entities alike followed the precedent of RadLab, reaching out to each other for funding and support.
The organizational model adopted the RadLab proved to be highly beneficial and much more productive and efficient. But that organizational model, which in turn became pervasive for the way in which U.S. would organize its R&D, I think in itself is really quite significant, and one of the great barrier breakers to scientific and technological advance.
Nowadays, the technologies and methodologies developed during World War II permeate through every level of American life. From microwaves to spacecraft, we reap the benefits of efforts sown over 50 years ago by the pioneers at RadLab. And though it is easy to get lost in the thousands of discoveries that have rocked our world since the end of the war, we must never forget that it all started in 1940 with a hunk of metal a few inches in diameter and a group of scientists whose intellect and determination knew no bounds.
with our full crew aboard, and our trust in the Lord, we're coming in on a wing and a prayer.